What would happen if every human being on Earth disappeared? This isn't the story of how we might vanish. It's the story of what happens to the world we leave behind. In this episode of Life After People, the 1.5 billion homes that house mankind are all in a race to survive, but each faces a different enemy. No matter where you live or what you keep inside, Life After People hits home. Welcome to Earth, population 0. One day after people. These are the places that man called home, where families were raised, meals were shared, and people grew old. In America's vast suburbs alone, 23 million homes now stand empty. Including those in the town that invented American suburbia, Levittown, New York. Built during the baby boom after the Second World War, and fueled by America's love affair with the car, Levittown pioneered a new type of suburban living that took America by storm. These mass-produced, prefabricated houses quickly multiplied into vast, sprawling areas. And by the year 2000, for the first time in history, half of all Americans lived in suburbs.
Levittown really fed the imagination of Americans for clean air, places where you could raise your kids in safety.
Now, this classic prototype of suburbia is devoid of people, but not of explosive danger. Because in kitchens and hot water heaters everywhere, the gas is still on. In the time of humans, most American homes were heated by natural gas. The highly flammable methane was pumped from naturally pressurized wells through 2.2 million miles of underground pipelines and compressors. But disaster sometimes erupted from this massive subterranean network.
Natural gas lines typically are ruptured because mankind intervenes with them. They dig up a pipe and rupture the pipe and causes a failure in the structural integrity. The fires can be very catastrophic because you're blowing methane gas into the air and it's mixing, and you've got a very large blowtorch going on there.
Now, natural pressure from the wells is enough to keep gas flowing into kitchens that will never see another meal.
In a life after people, the gas isn't going to stop flowing. It's still under pressure, it's flowing through the lines, and it's still going to come to the houses. The pilot lights are going to continue to burn.
Natural gas has no smell, but a substance called mercaptan was added to give it a distinctive odor that could alert people to leaks. Even so, gas leaks caused 2,500 home fires and explosions each year, which killed dozens and injured hundreds. Now, people are gone, but leaks still occur.
The best detector for a gas leak is your nose. But in Life After People, there will be nobody around to smell it. And then all you need is a spark.
The stove's pilot light provides the spark. And then this kitchen erupts in flame. One week after people, opulent homes face an entirely different enemy. On New York's Central Park, the luxurious San Remo apartments look down on a Manhattan devoid of people. In the time of humans, San Remo's apartments sold for up to $20 million.
The building is a prestige building. Apartments in the San Remo are huge.
Now the elite has moved out, and catastrophe is about to move in. A catastrophe that stems from a material that epitomized luxury. The danger emanates from a high-end paint with an unusual ingredient.
Many of the owners in the San Remo have chosen to use paints that were made with linseed oil rather than with a solvent that evaporates. It provides this beautiful glossy sheen, and it takes color very, very well. What happens when you're a painter? You leave the rags on the can of linseed oil paint. If it's just overnight, doesn't matter. But after people, those rags are time bombs.
As linseed oil interacts with oxygen in the air, the chemical reaction produces heat. Without adequate ventilation, spontaneous combustion can occur. In the time of humans, this was a common cause of household fires. In 1991, cotton rags soaked with linseed oil triggered a massive blaze in a Philadelphia skyscraper. Now, at the San Remo, the paint-soaked rags are smoldering. This New York icon is turning into a different kind of hot property. Over in the Bronx stands the mirror opposite of the swanky San Remo. Co-op City, one of the nation's largest apartment complexes cramped with 55,000 residents, epitomized the cheaply constructed high-rises of the 1960s.
This was badly constructed in the first place. Given the history of these structures, it really only takes 10 or 15 years after people for major parts of the structure to begin failing.
Co-op City's 50,000 pilings face a daunting enemy. They're sunk into reclaimed tidal marshland, which sinks a fraction of an inch each year.
The ground around the columns is slowly sinking. So what you have is a pavement area where you see the curbstone isn't tied to the rest of the building at all, and it's already significantly below what the original building line was.
The San Remo and Co-op City represent polar opposites in apartment engineering. One will be marred by fire in A Life After People. Will the other face death by water? One month after People. Methane, in its gaseous state, is not the only threat to the former homes of man. Another form of fuel, and one of mankind's coldest substances, is ominously warming up.
Liquefied natural gas is the liquid version of methane gas. If you take methane gas and cool it down to about minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit, it becomes a liquid. The reason for using liquefied natural gas is for ease of transportation. Since the volume is so much less, 600 times less, say, then you can fill a truck or a ship with liquid natural gas and carry much more of it on a smaller vessel.
If the liquid heats up, it becomes a gas again. And once the concentration in the air reaches 5%, it can become one of the most explosive substances on Earth.
Liquefied natural gas, once it's stored in a tank, could be very explosive, much more so than other forms of fossil fuels. When it mixes with air, then you have a very volatile, explosive ability, and it can destroy many city blocks with one explosion.
Now, with no humans to continuously open and close valves to maintain proper pressure, these tanks have become ticking time bombs.
Then the gas starts to expand, and you reach a pressure that the tanks weren't designed for, and it could be very devastating.
One by one, they rupture in a catastrophic chain reaction. 1 year after people. Man's once beloved suburban homes face a new set of enemies. Over the winter, pipes in each house freeze and burst. With the spring thaw, fountains of liquid destruction gush from thousands of pipes.
That day would be a rough day on the structure of Levittown itself.
After the flooding comes the mold and dry rot. The dampness also attracts the twin scourges of wooden homes, carpenter ants and termites. And the presence of both sets the scene for a primordial battle hidden within the rotting walls.
Carpenter ants will take termites. They'll prey on them. Termites protect themselves both from water loss and from predators by kind of walling off their galleries and feeding tubes with mud, and if that was breached, yes, the ants would go and prey on them. The termite would lose. They've got no way of defending themselves.
It's 2 years after people, and one type of home has already vanished from the Earth. For centuries, igloos were built in the Arctic, made from blocks of compressed snow. But these structures are unable to withstand time.
In cold Arctic climates, snow doesn't really melt. It evaporates. The ice that's in the snow goes directly from being a solid to being a gas.
Now, after just 2 years, the very last igloo has wafted into the frigid Arctic sky, and igloos are no more. In the next few years after people, mankind's most prized accomplishments face an inevitable fate. And the world's tallest skyscraper gets a foreclosure notice from nature. "10 years after people. Around the world, the places where mankind once lived now struggle against the returning force of nature. The tallest home on Earth is no exception. This is the Burj Khalifa in the desert kingdom of Dubai. When completed in 2010, it became the world's tallest skyscraper, and it's home to over 1,000 private apartments, some as high as the 108th floor.
The Burj Khalifa is over 2,700 feet tall. That's twice the height of the Empire State Building. You can see that building from over 95 kilometers away.
Staring blankly over a humid, salt-drenched wasteland, the building is in desperate need of a bath. In the time of humans, huge machines weighing 13 tons were used to wash the exterior in a desperate race to prevent corrosion from Dubai's dense, salty humidity.
These devices are suspended by cables. They are a potential point of failure, especially if they're already filled with fluid.
Dangling hundreds of feet in the air, they haven't scrubbed the building in a decade. And it shows.
The window washing machines are very heavy, and the cables would likely fail over 5 or 10 years.
One of the massive buckets breaks loose. And plummets 2,000 feet to the desert below. "15 years after people. High in the Hollywood Hills, an iconic house whose revolutionary engineering came to symbolize the California lifestyle of the 1960s is still intact. The Stahl House was built entirely of glass and steel on a plot so steep that many considered it to be unbuildable. The owner, Bud Stahl, disagreed. He spent 2 years personally constructing the concrete terraces that continue to anchor the house on its dramatic clifftop perch. It's a region vulnerable to catastrophic mudslides. Now, untamed wildfires ravage Los Angeles, but the house refuses to burn down.
The plate glass would crack in fires, but the steel framework remains in pretty good shape.
But by destroying the vegetation that binds the soil, the fires have created a new avenue of destruction. 200 miles north, one of America's most lavish homes has an engineering secret that may keep it standing tall in a life after people. This is Hearst Castle, built for the publishing tycoon William Randolph Hearst in San Simeon, California.
Hearst Castle is one of 6 homes that Mr. Hearst had. This was his most beloved.
Begun in 1919, Hearst's showplace was considered a masterpiece of earthquake-resistant design. Architect Julia Morgan's technique was to build ceilings that hang from hidden anchors and boxes that are separated from the rooms they cover, so they float during a quake.
The outdoor pool at Hearst Castle, referred to as the Neptune Pool, there's a concrete box surrounding it. The suspension of the pool is like the suspension of the ceilings in all of the rooms. They bear no weight. And so in an earthquake, the ceilings will actually float. And it's just the same as the pool. The structure around it is actually taking the brunt of whatever comes along.
In 2003, a 6.5 earthquake struck the castle, putting Morgan's construction methods to the test.
We had 400 visitors in the main house, Casa Grande. Not one bit of structural damage.
But there is another secret about Hearst Castle. Julia Morgan produced the castle's cement on site.
Hearst Castle was built of reinforced concrete. They had their own plant here on the hilltop. They imported sand, but they also used the beach sand.
In the centuries after people, will the decision to use beach sand keep the castle standing? Or will it lead to the downfall of this massive 56-bedroom home? In suburban homes across America, a new breed of cat is moving in. Bobcats, looking for places to make their dens.
They'll certainly move into the abandoned houses and the closets of those abandoned houses to set up a den. And so you might very well find a cat making a den in your underwear.
This has happened before. In 2008, after a wave of home repossessions hit America, bobcats wasted no time in moving into the vacant houses. And now, in a life after people, bobcats and other animals who move into homes begin to feed an invisible monster. A tiny pest once fed by people and their constant supply of human skin.
House dust mites are very tiny little mites. They feed on skin flakes. You replace the outer surface of your skin every couple of days, so little flakes are constantly falling off, and that's what they feed on.
Now, they will feed on the dander of the bobcat and its legion of new housemates. Another human scourge, the bedbug, won't lose any sleep over humanity's disappearance.
A bedbug is a small, true bug, doesn't feed on anything else except blood. And bedbugs will go back to being parasites of birds and bats, basically.
Across the deserted planet, all houses are decaying. But it was not the structures themselves, it was the treasures inside them that made these buildings into homes. Which human possessions will endure? The first to go is anything made of paper.
Paper's made of cellulose or cellulose fiber. And it's absorbent. And when it absorbs moisture, you have the perfect condition for decay or decomposition.
Natural fabrics are also beginning their inevitable unraveling. Wool doesn't retain moisture, so it's safe from rot, but it's hardly off the hook.
It has enemies as well. It has larvae, the case-making moth. Larvae love wool. Wool's gonna ultimately go maybe 30, 40 years.
Leather may seem more durable. In the time of humans, archaeologists sometimes unearthed leather shoes that were up to 2,000 years old, preserved in oxygen-deprived environments like peat and mud. But for most shoes, it's an inevitable march to oblivion.
What will be left? The steel grommets that you ran your shoelaces through, the plastic tip off the cotton laces, and maybe the hard rubber sole. They'll be around for 50, 60, 100 years, but your leather's gonna be long gone.
In living rooms and dens, household furniture is hardly sitting pretty.
The laminate on the particle board will become unglued, either through moisture exchange or through exposure to the sun. That laminate will peel away and accelerate the decomposition or the decay of the particle board inside.
Even durable trophies are losing the race against time.
Trophies are primarily made of plastic, formed plastic. The thin, shiny gold or silver laminate will begin to peel or delaminate.
CDs and DVDs are useless husks.
The polycarbonate will delaminate from that metal base and begin to crumble. And like most metals, the metals will begin to oxidize.
But of all the objects in a home, perhaps the most treasured were photographs. Photos printed on cheap commercial paper have already rotted away, largely due to the corrosive acids present in wood pulp. More expensive professional-grade photos will last longer. Printed on paper treated with chemicals that neutralize the acids, they are more resistant to rot, but eventually succumb to water damage and mold. But some of history's most important photographs may be saved. Deep beneath western Pennsylvania, one of the world's largest photographic collections remains in sharp focus. In 2001, the Corbis Archive moved its treasure trove of 11 million photographs to a refrigerated mine near Butler, Pennsylvania. There, priceless images of history are protected. The Hindenburg explosion, a playful Albert Einstein, and prize-winning photos of pop stars and politicians, the scientists and humanitarians, the wars and disasters that defined the modern era. All were stored at -4 degrees Fahrenheit.
At -4 degrees, pretty much all the chemical activity in a picture stops, and a picture that would fade in 30 to 70 years and be totally unreadable could last 5,000 years.
Whether it's a trailer park or a luxury tower, 30 years has taken a terrible toll on the homes of man. And the worst is yet to come. How do we know this? It's a future that's already happened at one of the most mysterious spots on Earth. This Italian hill town once bore witness to a dark and sinister history until people disappeared. It's 60 years into a life after people. Across the planet, nature's relentless invasion confronts every former home and community with catastrophic results. Like those that created the eerie ruins of Balestrino. This ancient Italian hill town survived a dark and tortured past, but could not survive the shifting earth beneath its walls.
If the stones of Balestrino could talk, they'd tell a story of 700 years of the rise and fall of a community. The story of a town teetering on the brink of collapse over many centuries, but surviving because man has used its intellect and ingenuity to keep it surviving.
Beneath this once picturesque village lies an ancient legacy of brutality and oppression. Here, in this decaying courtyard, the lords of Balestrino once meted out barbaric punishments to anyone who challenged their cruel dominion.
La pena più frequente era l'appendimento della vittima per i polsi a dietro schiena, in modo che si rompessero le spalle, e questo impediva poi di lavorare e quindi si moriva di fame.
From the 1400s onward, the town was ruled by feudal lords who treated the impoverished townspeople like slaves.
Il marchese era il despota assoluto, aveva la proprietà di tutte quelle che erano le forme di benessere, nel senso che possedeva i forni e i corsi d'acqua e quindi tutte le attività, compresa la...
Balestrino's feudal history also planted the seeds of its physical collapse. Since the feudal lords reserved the best building materials for themselves, residents had to make do with whatever they could find.
This reveals a lot about the construction of these buildings. The external skin of this wall has fallen away and revealed the underlying construction. I can see different types of stone incorporated into the wall, what looks like sandstone, limestone, bits of brick, tiles, anything that was available to the builders, they've incorporated in and cemented it in with a loose lime mortar.
And when the area's frequent earthquakes damaged fragile homes, residents again had to make do.
What we have here is a room with a double vaulted roof, but at some time in its history, it's developed a crack right along the center. And they've tried to repair and stabilize that crack by putting in this tie from side to side and tighten it up. Originally, this was an arched opening. You can see the arched stones here. But at a later date, it's been plastered over and a simple rectangular framing put in. But look at the crack. In time, that's going to get worse and worse. And already, you can see the framing is close to failure.
The modern age brought Balestrino freedom from the cruel grasp of tyranny, but not the iron grasp of nature.
The buildings are built on the slopes. Now, if those slopes are susceptible to landslips and movements, then so will the buildings be.
Unstable soil and Italy's susceptibility to devastating earthquakes compounded the problems of the town's makeshift construction. In 1997, an earthquake in Assisi, 200 miles away, provided a stark reminder of the threat lurking beneath Italy's sun-drenched landscape. Even the famed Basilica of St. Francis provided no sanctuary. Fearful that even worse could happen on Balestrino's failing hillsides, the town was abandoned in the 1950s. The Italian government evacuated all homes and built a newer, safer village nearby. Since then, Balestrino's slow slide into ruin bears testimony to the impermanence of mankind's constructions.
If armies of the past failed to conquer Balestrino, nature's now winning the battle.
In the mere 60 years since people were banished from Balestrino, catastrophic failure radiates in every direction.
This used to be a street, a thoroughfare through the town. And what's happened here is this entire gable wall has collapsed, creating the rubble. And even the tie bars that are a common feature of the stabilization measures for these buildings haven't been strong enough to prevent the whole wall collapsing into the street.
Today, streets that echoed with children's laughter now echo only with the bleating of stray goats. Ubaldo Pastorino grew up in Balestrino.
Sono i ricordi più belli della mia vita. Io ricordo mio padre si faceva la barba mettendo lo specchietto attaccato alla finestra e la faceva dal terrazzo. Peccato perché tutto si è ridotto a una rudere ormai. Questo è malinconico questo.
Even today, there are signs that the hillside is still on the move. And in the long run, it'll be nature that wins the battle. And the hillside will overcome, once again, the town of Balestrino, leaving little sign of what has been there for centuries.
The decline and fall of Balestrino bears mute testimony to the impermanence of every home on the planet. "75 years after people. California's Stahl House, built entirely of glass and steel, teeters precariously on its fire-blasted, rain-eroded hillside.
I think a house like that could potentially sit in a tilted position for some time, but not for a great length of time, because you're going to have all sorts of things shifting, and as things shift, forces are changed.
Now, a particularly heavy downpour washes out a final section of sediment beneath the house. And one of the 20th century's most iconic homes slides down the hill, crashing into the once fabled Sunset Strip below. "100 years after people, water has attacked New York's Co-op City from above and below."
These flat roofs drain to the inside to internal drains. So the water has no place else to go. It's going to drain through those leaks. Once it starts doing that, it invades the insulation underneath.
Meanwhile, the sinking land has reverted to tidal mudflats, and Co-op City resembles an apocalyptic Venice.
The area of the building that is in the splash zone, where waves are hitting it or the water level is rising and lowering with the tide, that splash zone is where it's going to fail.
A massive winter storm blows in from the northeast.
It's the nor'easter that would really do you in. You would get a fair amount of wave pounding against the building itself. That would begin to displace the building.
The weakened splash zone buckles under the nor'easter's assault. And the former homes of 55,000 New Yorkers are swallowed by the shifting tides. "200 years after people. The landscape around Hearst Castle looks surprisingly unchanged from the time of humans. But strange intruders graze on the hills.
Here at Hearst Castle, Mr. Hearst had the largest private zoo in the world. On 2,000 acres, the guests would come through a 2,000-acre, you call it a paddock, and he had every animal you could imagine.
In the 21st century, zebras could still be seen grazing in the pastures below the castle. Some will survive in a life after people.
The African plains are very similar. So zebras might proliferate because there's lots of grassy areas for them to eat and to actually have proper nutrition. But boy, the cats are going to come right in and be wanting some of those zebras.
The castle itself has survived numerous earthquakes, thanks to its architect Julia Morgan's innovative design. But now, her decision to use beach sand in the concrete has become a dagger at the heart of Hearst Castle.
The salt from the sand that was used to mix and make the concrete is probably going to be the major cause of its downfall, because the salts are continually being pushed deeper and deeper into the foundations of the castle through the moisture, and as that dries and it crystallizes, it just continues to grow and grow, and that just pushes things apart.
In the time of humans, this was barely noticeable. But over centuries, salt crystals slowly crack the cement. The area's relentless fog rusts the rebar, and major earthquakes periodically shake the foundations.
All you need, once you've got those crystals building up in there and you get those spaces and pockets, a major jolt from an earthquake, and that's all it is. That's it. The building's gone.
Now, the former haunt of Hollywood's rich and famous has reached the end of the road. A 7.2 earthquake rumbles through. Several rusted girders fail, and the huge towers fold into the building below. But this pales in comparison to what is coming. Earth is about to be visited by the most massive building collapse in its history. "250 years after people. In Dubai, the world's tallest building with its 1,000 empty apartments still towers 2,217 feet above the desert floor. Sandstorms and ocean humidity have shredded the Burj Khalifa's exterior, revealing a towering skeleton quaking in the wind.
In A Life After People, larger wind gusts would stress the building a little bit more, cracks would open up a little bit more.
Now, one question becomes critical. Which will fail first, the columns of the building's top or bottom?
There's a lot of stresses in that lower area that are subjected to the corrosive environment next to that salt water. And as concrete cracks and becomes stressed, one potential for the collapse is its connection at the base.
A huge sandstorm blows in from the desert. The tallest tower mankind ever built keels over in the largest building collapse the planet has ever seen. "300 years after people. In a mine deep beneath Pennsylvania, the prized Corbis Photographic Archive has also succumbed to humanity's destruction. Its priceless historic photographs were meant to last thousands of years at sub-freezing temperatures. But conditions long ago warmed up.
Once the generators run out of fuel, the refrigeration stops. The pictures that are lovingly stored there, carefully stored there, would begin to deteriorate. Instead of lasting 5,000 years, they might only last a few hundred. "10,000 years after people. Across most of the world, the descendants of house cats have remained small, trapped in their ecological niche by the presence of larger cats like mountain lions. But under certain conditions, evolution is taking a dramatic turn.
If domestic cats were isolated on an island where other cat species couldn't move in, the domestic cats would actually evolve to a bobcat size according to what actual prey is there for them to eat. So if there's larger prey, such as small deer, the cats are going to rule. They already are the top predator in most of the ecosystems that they inhabit, so there's no reason why they're not going to take control once all the people are gone.
50 million years after people. What has become of everything that made a house a home? The answer is found compressed into a thin geologic strata buried 1/4 mile deep in many places. This human layer, or strata, of the geologic record is unique.
The strata that represents human existence would indeed look very different because it would be enriched with materials that are refined from the earth and concentrated by humans.
Among these materials are the remnants of a common household substance, plastic.
It won't dissolve. The plastic will begin to lose hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and become more carbon rich. It'll turn from being clear, it'll turn yellowish first, and then brownish.
But no one really knows how long certain plastics can last, especially when buried away from oxygen, water, and ultraviolet light. Could some future species excavating the human layer stumble upon a frayed toothbrush or the eerie figure of a plastic toy? Reminders of the lives once lived and the homes once cherished, now buried in a narrow slice of Earth's geologic record, in a life after people.